Hello, dear friends, and welcome to Spirit Reports of Life After Life. We're basing our study, our weekly Sunday night study, on the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. And we're focusing on the Spirit Reports, which are in the second half of Heaven and Hell. My name is Sunshine Beck, and we're broadcasting live from Northern California. And I am affiliated with Divine Light Spiritist Society and Beseja Spiritual Healing Center. So welcome, dear friends, to this beautiful program. Today we will be studying a case that is around a subject that could be of interest to us and is, of course, something that hopefully we can reflect back into our own minds and hearts and souls. It is in the category of hardened spirits, and it is a bored spirit, dear friends. Can we imagine that? It is a beautiful subject right now where most of us are still socially more isolated and staying at home. So the question is boredom. So if you like to follow along in Heaven and Hell, you may go to page 481, and there we find our bored spirit, and the invocation took place in Bordeaux in 1862, and we're just asking the good spirits to inspire us with wonderful insights, healing moments, explanations that will help us to turn our minds and our souls and our hearts increasingly to the good. So be it, dear friends. So here it is. This spirit presented itself spontaneously to the medium demanding prayers. First question: what has led you to demand our prayers? And the answer is, I'm tired of wandering around aimlessly. Have you been in such a situation for a long time? About 180 years. Can we believe that? 180 years wandering around aimlessly. That is almost 2 centuries. Now that's shocking. That is something we need to, hopefully we were sitting down when this came through, because this is a lesson for us right here to see that this is a spirit, and we're breaking the news. It's a bored spirit. It wandered around aimlessly for 180 years. Now let us see why it took the spirit so long to come only to this place. And this is not yet, the final moment. This is the first invocation. What did you used to do on earth? And the answer is nothing good. What is your status among other spirits? I am among the bored ones. But that does not comprise a category in and of itself. Amongst us, the answer is everything comprises a category. Every sensation finds its similar, and sympathetic counterparts band together. Aha. So here's our first clue. And we may already know about this, but effort and repetition, it doesn't hurt to repeat it, right, friends? So here we hear from the spirit that every sensation finds its similar, which means as we think and as we feel, we emit. And of course, as we emit, we attract back. Law of affinity, law of attraction. A very good picture for us is to imagine a boomerang. I don't know whether when you were kids you had a boomerang. I did. And my brother and I, we would be throwing it, and lo and behold, it would always circle back and come back to you. And the harder you would throw it, the harder and faster it would come back. The more gently you threw it, the more gently it would come back. Unbelievable. What a lesson for children to own a boomerang. I don't know whether that's still something you can purchase, but I warmly recommend it. So when we go to Thought and Life, of course, we know that in chapter 8, Emmanuel teaches us about the law of association. And there we know that we all associate ourselves with like-minded spirits. And as we're incarnated, of course, we not only associate ourselves with incarnated spirits of like mind and like emotions, so to speak, but we also associate ourselves with spirits in the spirit world. And like attracts like. So if we tend to not know what we're going to do and we tend to be bored, we will be attracting bored spirits. And of course, the same is most likely true while we're incarnated. Just want to take a minute to say hello to friends. I can't resist. Hello, Carol. Lovely to see you. And there's Teresa Castro, dear friend. Thank you so much. Yes, California is a very sunny state. We've already had hot weather and it's already starting to get dry. But as we are on planet Earth, it's always two sides to the coin, right? Too much sun can also do damage, believe it or not. So let us continue. So there is the law of association, and this spirit is telling us, while we think there is no category, so to speak, on the other side of spirits who are bored, it is not quite true, because we will group ourselves around like-minded, like emotioned, like feeling spirits. So as we think and feel, we will attract. And that's what happened to this spirit. So let us see what else happens. Since you were not condemned to suffering, why have you remained for so long without progressing? Good question, right? I have been condemned to idleness, which among us is suffering. Anything that is not a joy is suffering. So we take a note of that. So if we do not have joy during our daily lives, in our activities, that means we're suffering according to this spirit. So that is an assessment question for us. How much joy do we experience in our daily activities? Because we're entitled to be joyful. And very often, even if we're not feeling joyful when we're doing something, we can probably change the focus of our lens and try to look at it from different angles, what we're doing, and perhaps find one that creates joy for us. And very often, when we look at even the suffering parts of our lives, or our daily lives, of our daily activities where we feel we're suffering, we might see it from the perspective that we're fulfilling our duty, and that due to our past lives, to our past actions, to our past thoughts, this is exactly what we need in order to transition to a new place. So we're invited tonight to, first of all, look at our own lives and see, am I experiencing joy? Am I enjoying my activities every single day? And if I don't, then let us make a list and write it down, which ones are the ones that give us a hard time. And we're probably still isolated, self-isolated, so we may have a little more time at our hands, and we can use this for our own therapy. So we make that list of those activities where we don't enjoy, we don't feel joy, and we look at them from different angles. Am I doing the good while I am fulfilling this particular activity that does not give me any joy? Well, as long as I'm doing the good, maybe I can see it from a different angle. Right, friends? Or is this activity helping me to shift my tendencies? Is it just because it's a new habit and consequently I find it hard and I'm not enjoying doing it? I may not enjoy not eating a quart of ice cream every single day. That might be suffering, right? But if we look and see at the consequences of not eating a quart or pint of ice cream every single day, by losing weight and feeling better, not having the sugar highs and lows, we may see it from a different angle, Right, friends? So this is the invitation. Invitation number 1. Let us continue. What might have caused the boredom you complain about? The consequences of my existence, the Spirit says. I didn't know how to employ the lengthy years I spent on earth. And the consequences have been reflected in this world. As we sow, so we reap. To each its own, Jesus taught us. So if we put seeds of boredom, of not making use of the gift of time that has been allotted to us in our lives, then the consequence will be that we will be suffering because we didn't do the good. And we know from the spirits on high, and we can study that in the Spirit's book, that we are accountable not only for all the evil we do, but we're also accountable for all the good we do not do. Even if we're idle, even if we're neutral, so to speak, and there is really no neutral. It's either good or bad. It's either good or evil. But if we think we're not doing anything bad, we're still liable for all the good we didn't do, we omitted from doing. And even one more step further, we're also liable, responsible for the evil that resulted from the good we didn't do. So this is like a 3-tiered experience, liability that we are prone to creating for ourselves because we are not aware of the consequences. And of course, now that we know, and we can read this in the Spirit's book from the Spirits on high, we are of course even more responsible, because if we know and we don't utilize the knowledge, apply it in our daily lives, guess what? Our consequence will definitely not become less, right, friends? So let us make a mental note of that there is a lot of consequences from not making use of the gift of time, to not be useful in our lives, to not fulfill our duties, to not do the good. So let us see. Can't spirits like you, who are wandering prey to boredom, emerge from such a state if they wanted to? Good question, right? So why was this spirit wandering around for 180 years in this state? Why didn't he want to just break out of it? Because obviously he was suffering. Let's see what the answer is. No. So the question is, can spirits like you emerge from such a state if they wanted to? The answer is no. They cannot always do so. So spirits can't always break out of a state like this one, state of boredom. Why? Because boredom has paralyzed their will. Aha. So this is really important for us. So this spirit wandered around for 180 years until this moment. Why? Because boredom had paralyzed their will. They are suffering the consequences of their existence. They're useless and wanting of initiative, and seeking no help from each other. They are left to themselves until the weariness of their idle state makes them desire to change it. Then, at the slightest awakening of their will, they find support and good counsel to assist them in their efforts to persevere. And we know that divine providence, if that shift happens, divine providence is right there helping us. All right, so let us back up. So the first thing is, a spirit can't just snap out of it. A bored spirit like this one cannot just snap out of it. Why? Because due to the boredom, their will was paralyzed. Now, when we go to, let's go to liberation first. Liberation. We will be starting a study of liberation next Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Carol Correa and I will be studying liberation. So friends, this is going to be exciting. So there is one little section that fits to this one, and that is, so why was this spirit? The will was compromised, And it was, of course, due to the law of affinity, surrounded by other bored spirits. That's the problem. Because if we imagine we're surrounded by this pool of, let's say, exclusively, all of our friends are bored, all our co-workers are bored, all our family members are bored. That's an amount of lethargy, an amount of nothing is really going to happen that creates progress that we will be swimming in. And this is what happened to this spirit. And as a result of each and every single one of the spirits surrounding this one who had a compromised willpower, nobody took the initiative and said, hey, there's another land out there. We can actually shift and be different, because they were all just hanging in the ropes, so to speak, right? So when we go to liberation now, we hear that, we learn in this little section from the instructor. He says, let's not forget that just as it takes a diamond to cut and polish another diamond, evil can only be corrected by evil, meaning that justice works through apparent injustice until love is born. So in other words, what they are telling us in different examples is, for a diamond to become really shiny and sparkly, it takes another diamond, the same medicine, to work it up. So that's like rough, right? Because a diamond is really hard, so it has to be worked. Two diamonds have to rub against each other. And that could be suffering if we project it onto our human level, right? And the same is with evil, can only be corrected by evil, which now leads us to understand that boredom is most likely going to be corrected by boredom, by other bored spirits. So this is kind of magical how this is being explained, right? How it fits right in. So we understand that's why the spirit, of course, law of affinity, surrounded by equally bored spirits. And that's divine justice. That's divine justice. But as we transcend this, then love comes in. And then divine providence will kick in and save us, as they say here, in good counsel to assist them in their efforts until they find support. They awaken. So now let us look at the will. Why is the will so important? Well, of course, Emmanuel, our dear friend and educator, spends a whole chapter in Thought and Life on the will. And it's actually chapter 2, right at the beginning. First, he explains that our mind is the mirror of life. Thought is life. But then he speaks about the will. Now, why is the will so important? Well, he tells us that the will is actually ruling our minds and our feelings, actually running everything. So what he says is, let's imagine a big corporation. And every single corporation always has one boss, right? One highest person who runs the whole show. And of course, in a corporation, we have many different departments. So the same is true for us humans, for us spirits here. Because we have a department of imagination in our minds, right? That's the corporation. We have a department of imagination, a department of memory. We have a department of joy. He gives other examples. We have a department of intelligence, of course, and so on. So we have many different departments, and all these are run by our will, by our willpower. Now we're starting to understand how important the will is. And if we have a compromised will, what is going to happen? We're going to lie on the couch. We don't want to get out of bed. We're bored by spiritism. We're bored by our jobs. Our children are not exciting us. Like last week's spirit, we had this mother in the previous incarnation who was not interested in taking care of anything and anyone, including her own children. She didn't even pick the mates for her children because she also felt her willpower was not well developed. It was not healthy. So So we're starting to understand that the will is of utmost importance. Now, how can we make sure that the will knows in which direction it is leading us, right? Because our will could be very well developed and lead us to robbing banks every single day. So obviously, it is important that we educate our will. Our will needs education. And Emmanuel has the following chapter, which is vocation, where he teaches us that we need, no, it's not vocation, it's, I think it's chapter 3. Let us quickly look. Instruction, chapter 4. And there he teaches us that the will needs education. It needs to be instructed so we can become more useful, so we can fulfill our duties in life. We can do the good. How? So there's 2 wings that we need. We can imagine that. Let's imagine we're a bird, and of course a bird can't fly, can't ascend if those 2 wings are not developed equally. So one wing is knowledge. So now we're educating ourselves. We're reading the books, we're listening to Kardec video, there's other sources online that we can educate ourselves with. Of course, there is the spiritual education, but there's also the knowledge, our professional knowledge, and there's school for the children. So there is many, many, many different sources of accumulating knowledge. So that is very important. That's working on our intellect. And as we already know here on planet Earth, we are a little bit ahead on that wing. That wing is a little stronger. Then we have the other wing, and the other wing is about love. It's about doing the good. It's about service. That's when we put the knowledge into action. And so it's equally important, as we know, that we're not just accumulating all the knowledge in our heads and it's getting bigger and bigger. No, we need to bring it into through our will into action, the words, through actions with our hands, our feet, our whole entire being gets employed. And the more educated our will is, the more we know what to do the good, and we understand it, the more we will ascend as human beings. That's our inner transformation. So now I think we understand a little bit better why the will is so important. So of course there is a therapeutic question lurking in the wings, but let's wait until the end. Let me see, there's so many beautiful friends. Yeah, Mark, hi Mark, nice to see you. Welcome, dear friend Narciso, thank you for joining. And Gabriel Ignacio, thank you. And Victoria Baker, thank you so much, friends. It's such a pleasure to have you here. So let us continue. So the will, right? Very important. So what else did he say here in this? So he said these spirits were bored because their willpower was paralyzed. I mean, we can imagine that, right? So then the next question is, so they were left to themselves. They were surrounded by like-minded bored spirits. And if we imagine we're all just hanging out on the couch and nothing is enticing us, not much is going to happen. We won't even be interested in thinking about the fact that there is greener pastures down the road, right? No. But then at the slightest awakening of their will, because it always happens, right? Law of progress. It might take 180 years or longer, but if they get even the slightest little crack for light into their minds and hearts, that's then when the assistance, divine providence, love kicks in and rescues them. Boredom, uselessness, and idleness result from laziness, and they are the children of ignorance. So, in other words, there's ignorance. It's the number one, it's the mother. And we can imagine that, right? Ignorance, the spirits also sometimes call it evil. It's just not knowing. It's an uneducated uneducated willpower. So if we're ignorant, we don't know any better. We don't also know the consequences, right, of not doing well, of not doing good. And then under that comes ignorance can very easily lead to laziness. And then laziness leads to boredom, uselessness, and idleness. So that's the ladder. Ignorance, out of that comes laziness, boredom, uselessness, and idleness. Now, of course, not every spirit is like that, right? Because some spirits, they are not educated, their will isn't educated, but they're very industrious, and they're out every day to cause harm, right? So, but we're just talking about one category right now, the sports spirit. So the spirit can't say much about their lives because they were useless, bored, idle, lazy. Didn't your previous lifetime enable you to improve? Yes, all of them. So all the previous lifetimes gave it the opportunity to improve, but only very slightly, since these lifetimes were reflections of one another. And we can imagine if the willpower is compromised and is not really getting the spirit up and out, wanting to educate and do the good, well, then progress is slowed down. And since one lifetime always builds on the next, so if there isn't much progress, obviously, we can understand what the spirit is reporting about their lifetimes, right? There is always progress, but it is so imperceptible that we don't even notice it. So if we don't progress, if we're bored, if our willpower isn't educated, if we're lazy, we are creating more pain for ourselves. The suffering becomes more. And remember, at the beginning we learned that if we don't feel joy, then we're suffering. And it's in our own hands, and that's always the good news, which I enjoy so much. It's in our own power to educate our will and direct our mind towards doing the good, feeling the good, thinking the good, visualizing the good, and molding the good. And that is how we undo the shackles that we formed against our own souls. That's how we break out. Right, friends? So, can you explain why your handwriting changes so frequently? So this must have been, coming through mediumship, writing mediumship. So can you explain why your handwriting changes so frequently? And the answer is because you ask a lot of questions. That tires me out and I need help in order to write. Wow. So that's what happens when we have weak willpower, right? So everything is too much. So the medium's guide is now giving us a final analysis, a wrap-up, is saying, it is mental effort which tires the spirit and which obliges us to help him so that he can respond to your questions. Mental effort, right? Because it starts with the mind, and above the mind is the will, as the manual teaches us. So that's where the boredom, the laziness starts. Of course, thought is life, right? Starts right there. He is as idle in the spirit world as he was on the earth. And we're not surprised about that either, because when we excarnate, we don't become magically a saint or an angel. No, it's just a revolving door. It's a change of garments. We let go of this garment here that's associated with sunshine, and we'll just be in a different garment, our perispirit. So, but my willpower, my thinking, my emotions, they will still be the same. We brought him to you in order to attempt to pull him out of his apathy and boredom, which is true suffering and sometimes more painful than acute pain would be, because it can prolong itself indefinitely. See, this is the problem. There is no initiative, and if you're surrounded by like-minded, bored, weak-willed people, spirits, we can imagine the rest, right? Can you imagine the torment of the perspective of endless boredom? Can we imagine that? Can we open our hearts and minds and feeling it for a moment? Can we imagine the torment of the perspective of endless boredom? Have we experienced boredom in our lives? Then we know how what a terrible wound that is, right? If things are just not interesting to us at all. And out of that comes boredom. It must be excruciating. So can you imagine the torment of the perspective of endless boredom? And the thing is, when we excarnate, what we surround, the spirits we surround ourselves with, even it's just 100% who we are, where we are at. So there's no more buffer or filter of the body. Here on earth, it's not as pure, the people we surround ourselves with. It's always kind of a little more mixed. But once we're excarnated, and then when it's much more pure, much more 100%. And then we also learned in the different cases earlier that lower order spirits don't experience a day or a night. It's just non-stop the same. Most of the spirits of this category look for an earthly existence only as a pastime and as a means to break the unbearable monotony of their spirit life. That is why they frequently enter their earthly lives without any definite resolution to foster the good. Because of course, when they're bored spirits, they come in and they're not just sparked with their interest. No, they still have the tendency to be bored. Consequently, they don't have a definite resolution to foster the good. And this in turn obligates them to start all over until finally true progress is felt. So now we understand better what boredom does as a wound, as an uneducated, compromised will. We've seen that it prolongs our suffering. The spirit was in the spirit life for 180 years, being in this colony of boredom. And we understand how important the will is. So we want to deviate for a moment before we finish to Leon Denis' book After Death. He has a whole chapter dedicated to the will, and it's at the end of the book, and it's called The Will. And these are quotations. He says, and this will help us to get a little bit of a different angle on the will. And you're invited to pull up the book if you own it and look up the chapter on the will, because of course what we picked out here is but the cherry on the cake, not even the icing. So there is a lot more to the will. It's a beautiful study. So the will is the driving force of the soul. So we can imagine that now, right? It's the CEO of our corporation, of all of our mind departments. So it's the driving force. It is the foundation of our individuality. Thought is life. As we think, we emit. The will runs that. Of course, it will be the foundation of our individuality, how we express ourselves in life. The will, the will's power over the fluids and perispirit is unlimited and increases with the elevation of the soul. So our willpower becomes more as we progress. So we will, as we educate, the will becomes much stronger. For example, animals don't have the same willpower as we are because we have continuous thought. So as we progress, the willpower, our will increases. Our will increases. The will of the individual is thus empowered to destroy and to heal living tissues. So if we project the will onto our own selves and our own illnesses or our own healing, we can, with our will, via the mind and our emotions, we can either destroy or we can heal. It can even modify material substances with new properties, like provoking drunkenness with clear water. Mind over matter. And we've heard that. We know that. Science has even caught on to that, right? That's how powerful our mind is. Ruled by the will, right? So the will can either destroy or heal. So if we have any conditions that we would like to change, let us look at where our mind goes and where our emotions go. Because as we think and feel, we create. We emit and we receive back. Boomerang, just same way. And the mind And the will is educated will, hopefully, is ruling the show, is the boss. If the act of the will is focused on material passions, then the fluidic form of the individual becomes gross, obviously. The more we focus on many big meals, on alcohol, on big houses, and travel, and all the materialistic, many cars, money, all dense matter, of course, again, as we emit, we attract our perispirit, we becomes more gross, more dense. The more we focus on dense matter, the denser we become. According to the manner in which we employ our will, our progress is regulated. So as we educate our will and how we direct our being, am I doing the good every single day from morning till evening? Obviously, as I employ my will towards the good, our progress is regulated. Our strength or weaknesses increase. So if I'm bored, my weaknesses increase. If I educate my will and I live for doing the good, then I will progress. There's no such thing as chance or fate. There are laws. To utilize and direct some, to obey the others, therein lies the secret of all greatness and elevation. And that is why it's so beautiful. We know that God's laws are written in our conscience, but sometimes we forget and sometimes we don't pay attention. So it is really wonderful to pull up the Spirit's book and in the third part to study the divine laws, to understand them. That is educating our will so we can become better people. A more precise knowledge of the laws, the powers of the Spirit, and to apply them will modify our tendencies. And the tendencies could be tendencies from previous incarnations, habits from previous incarnations, and of course this incarnation. So a more precise knowledge of the divine laws, the powers of the Spirit, and to apply them will modify our tendencies. When we're convinced that every deed and intention is being recorded within us to testify for or against us, we shall consider them more carefully, right? Law of cause and effect. The more we know that we are precisely, every seed, now is spring in our northern hemisphere, as we put these seeds in the ground, if I put a cucumber seed in the ground, I can't expect strawberries. It's just not going to happen. And that's the same with our thinking and our feelings. Same thing. It is even possible by persevering the impulse of the will to exert an influence on others through space. So we can also, with our minds, of course, while the will is driving it, influence others. And that is where we need to be cautious too. It's like, who am I? What am I emitting? Am I a gross polluter with my thoughts and my feelings? And am I maybe even directing it towards certain people or situations? Those are the mental darts. And so that is something for us to also be very aware of, because that will not be falling into the category of doing the good, right? So it is, the will can be directing our thoughts to influence others and our feelings as well. So he wraps up on such a beautiful note, and I want to share that with you. When the human mind, becoming cognizant of its powers, will concentrate the scattered will forces into one common effort of will to project them towards righteousness, beauty, and truth, then truly will humanity begin to climb the eternal heights. Then shall the face of the world be glorified. Isn't it beautiful? So when we as humans, our human mind focuses, we become more conscious of our thinking and what we're emitting in our feeling realm. And we educate ourselves, and then we concentrate these scattered will forces, will powers, to concentrate them on projecting righteousness, which is right thinking. It's kindness, it's love, it's indulgence, it's benevolence, it's forgiveness, it's all the good, all the virtues. So when we start projecting our will mind power towards righteousness and beauty and truth, Then truly will humanity begin to climb the eternal heights. Then shall the face of the world be glorified. And how could this not be more befitting our current situation? We are still in this quarantine phase, most of us at least, the quarantine of love. How can we make use of this beautiful time to focus on having more joy in doing the good while we do it, on seeing how we can be of service? And this world, our planet, right now, we are in this transition phase to becoming a planet of regeneration. And again, it couldn't be more important than now to follow Leon Denis' recipe for success, to focus our mind and our feeling towards righteousness, right thinking, towards beauty and truth. Right, friends? That is the invitation for today, to help us understand for our own sake, where am I in terms of my will? Am I prone to be bored? Or am I somebody who wakes up in the morning and makes God's to-do list before you make your own to-do list, your human to-do list, and you're ready to do the good and putting those beautiful, nourishing seeds into our mind garden of eternity? Because we know as we sow, so will we harvest. And the sowing, the springtime, is where we can use our willpower, our educated will, to put the right seeds in the garden. When the fall comes, we don't have any choice anymore. The harvest is always compulsory, right, friends? So let us close our eyes for the final prayer. And let us visualize ourselves embracing planet Earth with all the goodness that we have in our mind, the righteousness, the beauty, the joy, and the desire to do the good to our neighbors, to do the good for our family members, may they be blood related or our universal family. Let us envisioning our hearts wide open, praying for the good of all, praying for healing, praying for education, praying for indulgence towards others' imperfections, and asking God to help us to forgive each other so that we can be more powerful in this beautiful process of our own inner transformation, therewith helping the transformation of our beautiful planet Earth. Let us remember that now is our moment to put nourishing seeds into our gardens of eternity that will not only nourish ourselves, but all of our neighbors, all of our fellow humans, and helping us all to transition to more love. And so be it. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining. And so God willing, we will meet again next Sunday, same time, with another case from heaven and hell. God bless you, friends. Bye.